Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for attending this session that we have today on preparing competitive applications. We're very lucky to have three representatives from three U.S. universities with us today. The University of Notre Dame, Washington University in St. Louis, and University of Miami. And so today, what we'll go over is kind of the holistic admissions process and what to consider when you're putting together your application, right? And what's going to make it stand out. So before we get into it, I just want to, if you could move on to the next one, perfect, reintroduce ourselves, because I'm sure most of you know who we are, but we are Education USA, a U.S. Department of State network of advising centers all around the world. And what we do is we offer accurate, comprehensive, current information on all the opportunities that exist in terms of studying in the U.S. for higher education. And we offer tons of services, such as organizing webinars like this, but also we put together university fairs, do presentations at schools, offer individual advising, etc. And all of our services are free. So if you don't already follow us, please feel free to follow us on social media so you can kind of stay up to date on what we're doing, events, tips, etc. During the session, if you have questions, you can use the question and answer function. That'll be the best way to get your questions actually answered, and we'll monitor those as we go through. If there's things that I can answer that are pretty straightforward during the session, I will. But if not, we'll leave it to the end to have an open question and answer period. Okay. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach.
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks so much to Education USA for having us. Thank you all for coming and making some time today. Really excited to share a little bit about what's called holistic application review, a little bit kind of distinct amongst many kind of U.S. institutions. And it's going to vary a little bit from how, college entrance kind of works in a lot of the other parts of the world. So we're happy to kind of help demystify that, answer some questions, and of course, along the way, share a little bit about our institutions as well. So Victor, you want to go forward here one more, please? Excellent. So thanks so much for coming out. We're going to just give you a sense of how this is going to run today. We'll kind of do at the start here, maybe 3 to 5 minutes on each of our institutions so you'll get to know them, be able to introduce ourselves a little bit and hear about that. Then we'll talk about kind of various components of application review, and also just making sure that you're thinking about how to strategize and put your best foot forward to a lot of our schools. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers. So as was said, go ahead and throw anything you have in the Q&A section as we're going through, and we're happy to try and get to as many as we can while trying to make sure we're respectful of everyone's time today. So to introduce myself, my name is Zach Lonzinski. I'm a senior assistant director at the University of Notre Dame. We're located in South Bend, Indiana. This is my 7th year in the office. I've had Spain for probably 4 or 5 of that now, so I've had the fortune to travel to Spain. Not this year due to some family circumstances, which was it's exciting. We're actually expecting our first child here in T-minus like 26 days, something like that. So getting real, but happy to be virtual this year. So Victor, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Thomas. I work on the admission team at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. And I have been working with students applying from Spain for a few years. We take a kind of team-based approach, and so you might end up seeing another admission officer's contact information throughout the application process. But I have visited Spain and enjoy working with the EducationUSA branch there. Emily?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Emily Mayfield. I'm a senior assistant director here at the University of Miami, and I've worked with applicants from Spain for the past few years now. I've had the pleasure of traveling to Spain with both Victor and Zach, and so really excited to talk to you all a little bit more about the admission process and holistic review here in the US. And I think with that being said, I'll kind of kick things off with talking a little bit about the University of Miami. So we are a medium-sized private research institution in Coral Gables, Florida. We're about 12,000 undergraduates strong, and we were founded back in 1925. So we're coming up on our centennial anniversary soon, which is really exciting for us. Now our school is, medium-sized. So we're at that sweet spot, large enough where you'll have access to research and internships. We're known for having that big school spirit, but small enough where your average class size is around 15 to 25 students, and our student to faculty ratio is about 11 to 1. We also have a really sizable international population, with about 8% of our student body identifying as non-US citizens or permanent residents, and about 93 countries are represented on our campus, of course, including Spain. Another fun fact that I always love to mention is that over half of our student body speaks 2 or more languages. So you'll definitely hear lots of languages around on campus. Now here on this slide, you'll see our 9 undergraduate schools and colleges. And across these, we have over 100 majors and programs offered. So there's really something for everyone. And I'd like to highlight our direct admission philosophy. So this is something that's a little bit unique about us. When you apply to the University of Miami, you do apply directly to one of our 9 undergraduate schools and colleges. And the benefit of that is really that you're able to start taking classes for your major right away. So for example, if you're interested in mechanical engineering, you are able to apply directly to the College of Engineering. If you're admitted, you will start taking engineering classes your first semester on campus. Now, that being said, we allow for a really interdisciplinary approach towards education. So while you may be studying primarily in the College of Engineering, if that is your major, we allow for you to study across schools or colleges. So for example, if you're interested in music, you're able to start taking classes in the Frost School of Music as well. You can also pursue other opportunities in experiential learning through any of our schools or colleges. So we really allow for that flexibility towards your studies. Another thing is that we're all about experiential learning. So over 80% of our students are involved in some type of experiential learning, whether that be research, study abroad, or an internship. So that's kind of a key facet of our educational experience here at the University of Miami, is learning by doing. Now, the next thing I'd like to highlight is our campus. So we do have a true college campus. We're about 15 minutes south of the downtown Miami area. This is where our main campus is located, but we do have 2 additional campuses. So our main campus is located in Coral Gables, and then we also have a second campus. That's that top picture that you see on the left-hand side on the Virginia Key. That is primarily where our students in the Rosenstiel School of Marine Atmospheric and Earth Science study, also where a lot of research takes place. And then we have a third campus in downtown Miami. This is where our Miller School of Medicine is located. But primarily you will be kind of in that main Coral Gables campus, where you'll have that true college campus. It's suburban, it's residential, it's safe, but you have access to the city as well. So a lot of our students are taking advantage of the city of Miami for internships, for experiential learning, for field trips, for culture. And so it's kind of a key aspect of the experience at Miami is the city of Miami. A lot of the issues in Miami are really poised to address kind of things that are being discussed, whether that be immigration, climate change, technology, and AI. These are all things that we're really thinking about as close as we are to the city of Miami. So that's kind of what I wanted to highlight in terms of those key aspects. And we'll talk a little bit more about the admission process later on, but I'll turn it over to my colleague Victor now to tell you a little bit more about WashU. So Victor, take it away.
Thanks so much, Emily. And once again, thank you to you all for joining. We know that you're very busy people with busy evening schedules, and we are happy that you have chosen to spend some time learning about our institutions and about the U.S. university application process. WashU is also, we think of ourselves as a medium-sized school, though we are a little bit smaller than the University of Miami. We have a total of about 7,500 undergraduate students. And we do have graduate students, but the main focus of our Danforth campus, which is what you see beautifully pictured here, is our undergraduate student experience. At WashU, well, we're located in St. Louis, Missouri, which is right on the Mississippi River in the Midwest of the United States. St. Louis is known for having the Gateway to the West Arch, and a lot of lively kind of cultural opportunities, great cuisine in St. Louis, lots of opportunities that you might find at a big city like New York or LA or Chicago, but the feel and the convenience and the accessibility of a smaller city, and marrying that kind of big city opportunity with small city feel is something that our students really value. WashU's campus is about 10 kilometers from downtown St. Louis, so it takes 15 to maybe 20 minutes if you're riding the public transportation, the train. Students get free access to that, and it allows them to get off campus and around St. Louis very, very easily. So this is all to say that St. Louis is a wonderful place to be a college student. WashU's campus is perfectly positioned, proximal enough to the city to get into it easily, but also far enough away that you have a beautiful, walkable, very residential campus. I want to spend a little bit of time, like Emily did, talking about the academic divisions or colleges under the umbrella of the university at WashU. WashU has 5 undergraduate divisions. We have a College of Arts and Sciences, a School of Engineering, a business school, and then colleges of art and architecture. When you apply to WashU, you select one of these 5 divisions as your primary division, the division where you'll earn your degree and earn your first major. But once you get to WashU, you have access to all 5 divisions. That is something that is really valued by our students. They appreciate the ability to be able to take classes outside of their primary division and even to earn second majors and minors outside of that division. So some concrete examples of how this might work. Perhaps your primary major and your degree is in mechanical engineering through the McKelvey School of Engineering. But you also want to get a second major in international relations. Our version of that is called global studies. You can easily cross into the College of Arts and Sciences and earn that second major in global studies while maintaining your engineering degree in McKelvey. Another good example would be someone that wants to go into marketing. Maybe they are home-based in the Olin Business School and studying marketing and advertising, but they get a second major in the College of Arts and Sciences in psychology to learn how people think as they pursue that career in marketing. And then they also take coursework or maybe even get a minor in communication design, our version of graphic design, which will give them the skill set to be able to navigate a career where visual imagery and creation is really important. So these disparate interests can be pursued at WashU. About 80% of our students will do more than just one single major, and we are very, very well known for being a very interdisciplinary and flexible institution. Before I pass it over to Zach, I just want to conclude with how our students describe the WashU community. The words that come to mind are supportive, collaborative, and balanced. Students are friendly to each other. They are welcoming of others. They love to learn from people who have different backgrounds than they do. And you, as a student from Spain, bring a very diverse perspective to the WashU community. In terms of collaborative, they work together. They are not competitive or cutthroat. That is not the kind of culture that we have at WashU. And then balanced, our students work hard academically, but then they know when to close their laptops on the weekend and have some fun, whether it's with their student groups, with athletic teams or performing arts ensembles, or getting off campus and into the city of St. Louis to explore the wonderful city there. Zach, I'll turn it to you.
All right. Thanks, Victor. Excellent. So I'm here with the University of Notre Dame. The University of Notre Dame, we were founded in 1842 by a young Holy Cross priest from France by the name of Father Edward Sorin. Father Sorin arrived in what would become our campus in November, but just 1 week after arriving on what would become our beautiful campus here in South Bend, Indiana, Father Sorin wrote in a letter back to his boss in France saying this college will be one of the most powerful means for doing good in this country. And that has been our mission and what we've had to live up to for the last 180 plus years. We are a mission-driven institution. If you are considering Notre Dame, you want to learn more about the university and how we see ourselves as, occupying a little bit of a distinct niche in higher education in the United States, I invite you to read our mission statement. Particularly the first 2 or 3 paragraphs are going to do an incredible job of helping you understand how Notre Dame sees itself as both a Catholic institution. We are a faith-based school, and also this place where faith and science must inform one another, and true inquiry must be done in order to advance and make real progress in the world. And that really is at the charge of everything we do at Notre Dame. And so that's something that's really, really exciting. All 3 schools actually presenting today are a member of what we call the Association of American Universities. Essentially, we are a group of the top 71 research institutions in the United States. We have to have certain facilities, spend a certain amount of money. So, for example, at Notre Dame, we spent $224 million in research on our campus last year, have certain kind of faculty who are achieving certain goals and metrics. And so really, really top undergraduate research being done at all of our institutions. What makes Notre Dame a little bit distinct in this world is that we are, of those 71 schools, the only one that is faith-based. And so truly, as our mission was set out for us by Father Sorin, we are truly this place where faith and science coexist and inform one another like nowhere else in the world. About 80% of our students do identify as Catholic. There's, of course, a wide range on the spectrum there. And we also have an incredible campus ministry that caters to students of all faith backgrounds because we want students who want to come to Notre Dame and ask big questions. Does God exist, or what does the divine look like? What kind of human person do I want to be? How do I structure my morals and my ethics in the world? And how do I see myself living this good, purposeful life? And so we're really wanting to find students who want to engage with what we say mind, body, and spirit. Certainly, we're going to challenge you. We're a top 20 research institution, as you say there. We're going to make sure that you're having a lot of fun. We do have 500 student clubs and organizations. We have Division I athletics. So we're actually going to we put 80,000 people in our football stadium on Saturdays, which is a lot of fun, or American football stadium, I should say. And certainly, really, really great school spirit, student pride, things like that. One thing that's a little bit different than what you saw at Miami is that you're applying to the University of Notre Dame. You indicate an interest in these different schools and colleges, but you're applying to the university overall. That's not better or worse than Miami. It's just different institutional philosophies. So as you're going about your own kind of exploration and thinking about what's important to you, that's just one way that we approach it. Whereas some schools are a bit more direct admit, some schools are just admission to the institution themselves. But we're kind of on you're applying to Notre Dame end of that spectrum. So lots of great opportunities for both research, faith, school spirit, all those great pieces too. And then one more, Victor, thank you much. We also are really making a huge push on affordability. And actually, there's a really, really exciting announcement that came out for Notre Dame in September. We are what is called need blind for all of our applicants, domestic and international. Essentially, that means whoever is applying to the University of Notre Dame, we are not looking at a family's financial situation or ability to pay when making that determination on that application. Certainly, there are a lot of schools that have great financial aid for international students, even if they have to be need aware. So there's lots of pathways to institutions across the United States. But Notre Dame is actually one of 9 schools across the country that can actually say we are need blind for all students. We also then meet 100% of demonstrated need. You'll do that by filling out a document called the CSS profile. We will make sure that we kind of help you walk through that process when it comes, but something that's very, very exciting and a great opportunity for so many students with that great announcement through the Pathways to Notre Dame initiative that came out. So Catholic institution, South Bend, Indiana, top research school, top Division I athletics, and certainly then a great affordable option and great affordable push that we're making at the university. So encourage you to kind of check that out and to learn more. And with that, I will invite my colleagues back Hopefully you got a little bit of a taste with about the university. Emily, would you mind dropping your message about the QR code in again, just for any of our late registrants? If you want, this will be at the end of our presentation too, but if you want information about any of our 3 schools, there's gonna be a little form you can fill out. We're kind of sharing information there. But with that, we're going to jump into holistic review. And this is a term that's going to be a little bit different for a lot of you because, especially in Europe, a lot of the kind of entrance to colleges are basically based on an exam. You get a certain score, you get certain grades or certain results on your exams, and you're able to gain acceptance to institutions from that. Great process, works for a lot of students. At schools like the schools that are gathered here today, we do things a little bit differently, and we do what's called holistic application review, which means that we want to see everything on your application. And Victor, can you jump to the next one, please? Thank you much. Every part of the application that you're submitting to us matters because we want to get to know you as a whole person, a holistic person. We want to make sure that you're going to be someone who's going to be academically successful at our institutions, right? Academics are certainly going to be important. We want to see that you're doing well. I mean, bachillerato or any other kind of curriculum that you're taking in Spain. But then we're also going to see that you're going to be someone who's a great member of our community, right? We've kind of highlighted different points of, how Victor was talking about how WashU is super collaborative. And I would say that probably extends to Notre Dame and Miami as well. That's why we travel together. That's why we have a lot of fun, right? We're looking for those students who are engaged in community and really drive community. And we'll talk about how we look for that in a second. But then also, we're trying to find potential. Like, how are you someone who's made the most of opportunities that have been presented to you? Certainly understanding that that looks different across the world, right? Context is very, very important. Your educational system is very different than in the United States, and that's just a fact. And that means that sometimes, like, you don't have the same kind of extracurricular activities because that's not how your school is set up, right? And so all of that context is being taken into account in our application reviews. But we're looking to find those students who really make the most of the opportunities that are presented to them. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues here to actually share a little bit more about how specifically we do that. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. Yeah, so we'll kind of start off with talking a little bit about rigor in academic performance, which is one aspect of what Zach referred to as holistic admission, right? At the end of the day, we are all academic institutions. Therefore, we care about your academic performance. So this is going to be one of the first factors that we really consider when we look at you as an applicant. Now, I'll kind of break this down into 2 different components. So first, you're going to have rigor, and then you're also going to have the actual performance in school. We'll first talk a little bit about what rigor means and kind of how we identify that in the context of you as an applicant. So the first thing that we're going to look at is what your school offers. And so this is going to be really key because we're not going to be comparing you as a student who might have the bachillerato to someone who has IB or AP classes. So your school is going to provide us with something called a school report that essentially gives a little bit more context about what types of courses are offered at your school, what type of curriculum you have. We want to see that you're taking advantage of the most challenging courses that are offered to you. But we also understand that not every curriculum is the same. So for example, if you are only offered the bachillerato, we understand that that is a challenging curriculum in and of itself. And we're not going to be looking at that in comparison to a student who is doing a full IB diploma program. We understand that those are both rigorous in and of themselves. But we also want to think about, things like, what are you interested in studying? So for example, I'll go back to my example about a student who is interested in engineering at the University of Miami. If you're interested in that kind of subject, we might look at, are you taking challenging math and science courses? Because that's going to indicate to us that you're prepared for that type of coursework that you're going to be engaged with at the college level. So rigor is kind of one of those components that we're going to be considering when we look at you in terms of your academic and academic performance. The other aspect that we'll be considering is how challenging are your courses. So in addition to that rigor component, we also want to see that you're doing well in your classes, right? If you're just taking challenging classes, but you're not doing so well in them, that might not be a good sign to us that you're prepared for the type of coursework that we have at all of our schools. So your transcripts can really paint a picture of your academic performance throughout high school. That being said, we are human beings that are reading your applications, right? And we understand that you are human beings as well. So we're going to look for things that might paint a picture for how you've done at school. For example, maybe you struggled a little bit at the beginning of school, but you've worked your way up and now you're doing a lot better in your classes. So things like upward grade trends, that can paint a picture that maybe you've learned from your mistakes and that has influenced your performance later in your academic career. It's also key that you're meeting your school's graduation requirements. So for example, are you taking all required units of math that your school requires you to do? So these are things that we're going to consider as well. Overall, we essentially want to see students who are strong academically and who are doing well in those classes, because that's a sign that you're going to come to our schools and you're going to do well there as well. So now we're going to move on to another aspect of the admission process in holistic review. So we can go to the next slide here. And that's going to be testing. Now, there's kind of some aspects of testing that might be different depending on the schools that you talk to. So we'll go over some terminology as well as kind of what testing looks like in the landscape of international admissions. Now, universities in the US can consider standardized testing in the admission process, and it's important to remind ourselves that this is just one additional piece of academic information that schools can consider when they're determining your preparedness for university. So let's go over some terms here. Now, the first term we're going to discuss is test blind. So this might be the case when a school does not even consider standardized test scores, which would refer to the SAT or the ACT when they're thinking about the admission process. Then there's also tests required. So that might be where you have to submit your standardized test scores when you are applying for admission. So an example of that would be Florida public schools. So not private, right? Miami is private, but Florida public schools are going to require that you submit test scores. And then last but not least, we have test optional. And the guidance can vary by school, but in general, this means that students can submit scores, but they're not required to do so. It also likely means that if you submit scores, you're not at an advantage, nor are you at a disadvantage if you do not submit test scores. Now, testing policies can really change depending on institutional priorities, state guidelines, so it's always a good idea to kind of check what the policies are for the schools that you're interested in applying to. So for example, Miami and WashU, we are both test optional for this upcoming year. So for any students who are in their final year of schooling, we are test optional, but we haven't made any decisions beyond that. So it might be a good idea to check back on our websites in early next year for those who might be younger to see any guidance for students beyond 2025. Whereas Notre Dame has made that decision to go test optional for both 2025 and 2026. So things can change. You know, COVID has really impacted testing policies. There's other policies, you know, that may be different for international applicants versus domestic applicants. So it's always a good idea to kind of check what the guidance is depending on the schools that you're applying to. Now, another thing to mention is when schools are test optional, when should you submit scores? So it's always a good idea to look into what a competitive score might be for that specific institution. So a lot of schools will publish what's called a middle 50% range, which is essentially where the middle 50% of applicants who were admitted are scoring. So for example, for Miami, that would be between a 1360 to a 1490, but it can really depend as you look at the different institutions. It's also important to note that this can change depending on applicant pool. So we'll go over our different admission plans and applicant pools later in this, and that range can vary depending on the admission plan that you choose. It's also important to note that the applicant is different, right? Every applicant is different. So we understand that, you know, an applicant coming from Spain, that's going to be very different from an applicant coming from Massachusetts, right? And so we will consider that context as well, just like we talked about with academic rigor when we look at national curriculum versus IB. That's something that we're going to keep in mind when we look at standardized test scores as well. So my best advice is to ask about the testing policies for the schools that you're interested in, and keep in mind that this is just one aspect of the holistic review process. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Victor to talk a little bit more about some other aspects of holistic admission.
Thanks, Emily. And before we transition, Salma had a good question in Q&A that I'd like you to address, Emily. Salma is writing the SAT in November and December and wondering if universities will allow students to update their applications with testing completed kind of during the application cycle. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say in general, I would say universities like to see that you've completed the test prior to the application deadline, but it can vary by school. So, you know, Miami, for example, will give you 10 additional days to change your testing policy. So again, kind of looking at the guidance by school, it's important to check those deadlines, but I would say in general, schools do like to see that you've completed the test prior to the application deadline. Great question.
Thanks. All right, so let's kind of change gears from academics a little bit and talk about things outside of the academic review that US universities will look at. This is where I think most people have the association with what's called, again, holistic review, because the reality at schools like WashU, Notre Dame, and University of Miami is that most of the applicants who apply to our schools meet the academic thresholds and benchmarks that we feel are necessary to predict their success at our institutions. I can't put an actual percentage on it, but I would say in most of our cases, it's the majority, if not the vast majority of applicants. So we have to look beyond that. And sometimes students will shine in different parts of the application. It might be in activities, it might be in their recommendation letters, it might be in the stories that they tell themselves through their essays. So in terms of extracurricular activities and responsibilities, we are not looking for one specific thing. It is a myth that you have to have a certain number of hours of community service, or you have to have a particular type of leadership role on a team or with a club. We are seeing students with varied interests and varied levels of engagement. Whatever you do outside the classroom is something that you should consider sharing with us. It might not even be a school club, right? Maybe it is just a hobby. Maybe you love to sew and you sew things for your friends and families. You do kind of thrifting of the clothes that you wear. That's not the sewing club, but it is still something that you are investing time in and that we would love to know about. So think about your extracurricular activities on these 4 dimensions. How engaged and committed are you? How much leadership or initiative have you taken? What are the individual kind of passions that you have? And how does that connect to your community, whether it be your school or your neighborhood or even your state or country, right? Finally, don't be afraid to share something that may seem more like a responsibility. Maybe you're an older sibling and you take care of your younger siblings or your younger cousins. That is a responsibility that we would love to know about, and that's important to who you are as a person outside the classroom. In terms of letters of recommendation, you will see at the very bottom here that each of our institutions has different kind of requirements here, but typically colleges in the US, universities in the US will require one from a teacher and or one from a counselor. And this is an opportunity for us to learn about you as a person in the words of someone else. It also can give us context toward your school community. And this is particularly important, you know, when we hear from a counselor who advises a majority of the graduating class and shares with us that you as an individual applicant are outshining a lot of your peers. That context is really, really important to us. These are also, it's important to know that we understand that recommendation letters are written by people that aren't the applicants themselves. So we are not scoring recommendation letters based on their quality, but more on the information that is communicated that is relevant to the individual applicant, and trying to see how that kind of a different perspective from someone else works to help create this story about you as an applicant, right? Zach, am I doing personal statements? I can't remember.
You're doing such a great job. Keep going.
Okay, I'll do personal statements and essay, and then I'll turn it over to Zach. So the final kind of main piece outside of academics, we've talked about activities, we've talked about recommendation letters, are the college essays, right? The personal statements. And this, I know, is the part of the application kind of process that is really, really stressful sometimes for students. And I hope that seeing Zach and Emily and me on this webinar will reassure you that we are real people on the other end of this submission process that are really looking to get to know you and are really hoping to just excite you about the prospect of going to university generally, right? The reality is that our institutions are not going to be able to admit every single student, but that doesn't mean that we don't want every single student's story to be shared through the application process as authentically and as passionately as you want to as an individual. So what we are looking for, again, is not something specific, is not something groundbreaking, but is for you to just be you. You are bound to write about a topic that someone else in the application process will write about. It might not be a unique topic, but it will be a unique voice if you use your voice. And this is particularly important as there are more and more tools, including AI and computer kind of assistants, that will that will kind of give the illusion of a story or an essay, but they really aren't you. And that's something that we are really able to kind of sniff out. And more importantly, if you have an opportunity to use your voice, it is a really missed opportunity if you choose to have someone else or something else write that. So inject your unique voice, inject your personal values and your mission and purpose into the essays. Show us who you are, right? For supplements, you might want to tell us why you might be a good fit for us as an institution. We are looking at your analytical and writing abilities, but most of the time, just like academics, most students are kind of clearing that threshold. All right. So that's hopefully some reassurance around college essays and personal statements. Zach, why don't you finish us off here?
Yeah, for sure. And this actually gets to one of the questions that we've had in our Q&A as well, about basically kind of a rough timeline of how to prepare yourself for going to uni in the USA. Thinking about, I think we have a great question here from an anonymous attendee about, what age should I be doing the SAT in order to go to uni in 2026 and things like that. So this is kind of, we'll try and walk it through here. I think really the admissions process for the United States starts from the moment you start high school, or kind of that equivalent, right? Some schools in some countries, it's kind of like the equivalent of the US grades 10 through 12. Some countries it's a 4-year high school process. We kind of read that again in the context of your own individual journey, right? But we want to see that you're starting and getting those good grades, taking on challenging courses, really making sure that you're trying to push yourself in high school and to learn more about yourself as well as getting engaged outside of the classroom, right? When you're thinking about kind of deadlines and thinking about each piece of the application, this is where we will try and make sure that we can help you here, because this process starts a lot earlier than if you're applying to schools maybe in Europe, right? Generally, we'll talk about specific deadlines, I think, on the next slide. But generally, if you're thinking about going to the United States, you should really be kind of aware of that starting maybe during your junior year or kind of the second to last year before you leave, the equivalent of US 11th grade. Um, because you want to make sure that you're starting to think about like letters of recommendation and your extracurricular activities, and then also the testing. Generally, I would say recommendations for testing that would happen kind of the spring of the year before you're going to apply. So if you're going to apply in 2020 to start in fall 2026, you would be applying during like fall of 2025 or maybe spring of 2026. And so you should probably be looking to take an exam. If you're taking an SAT or ACT, you're probably going to want to try and schedule those for the spring of 2025, basically a year in advance, just to make sure you give yourself the maximum flexibility, right? Sometimes you have to go to certain testing centers around the world. It may be, require a little bit of a trip from your country. So there's, a little bit of making sure that you're able to take that exam, you're able to build those logistics in. There are lots of schools, again, that are test optional. All three of us here are at least test optional for this application cycle. Maybe for more application cycles beyond that, though some of us haven't made decisions yet, and some of us still have to make further decisions, right? So I generally would advise if you're going to be applying 2026 to start fall 2026 at a U.S. institution, you should probably look at taking that SAT or ACT in spring of 2025 or at no later than fall of 2025. I think there's another great question here. Oh, maybe someone answered it already, but yeah, I think someone answered it already. So I forgot what it was now. Sorry about that. Um, the other piece to this is as you're starting to go through this, feel free to be in touch with us. We're actually going to share our contact information in a couple slides. You will have our emails. You are more than welcome to reach out to us. As Victor said, we are real human beings. We do this work because we want to help students in this process. We know, especially for international students, the US process can be very, very confusing. And that's part of the joy that we get in this work is helping you navigate this and trying to help you present your best application. So that, hey, you know what? You submitted an application to Notre Dame. Maybe, unfortunately, it's still not going to work out, but maybe that advice that I will help give you helps you get into another institution, maybe helps you get some great financial aid at that institution too. And that's just as important to us to make sure that we're helping you find those great next steps and those next great opportunities. And then the last thing I would say is if there's any kind of, there's on the common application, which is the main application most students will be using to apply to our institutions, it actually can go to about 800 different institutions. You can kind of select from there the ones that you're interested in. But on that section, there's also what's called an additional information section. And that's essentially where you can share any sort of information that you want to make sure is known with the admissions office. So don't feel afraid to like, hey, if there's something weird about my life's journey or educational journey that I just want to make sure I share a little bit more with, definitely feel free to use that section. We want to make sure that we're getting everything that's really important. And we may even advise you to use that section if you share a story with us when you're communicating with us to be making sure that, hey, you know what, that would be really good for additional information section because it's not really like an essay that you want to write or anything like that. It's not necessarily interesting, but it can be important to your educational journey. So there's lots of ways to help get that information to us. When I talk about dates and deadlines, thanks, Victor. Basically, you're actually applying to institutions kind of the fall before you would start. So if you're starting, for example, in fall 2025, you would be applying this fall. These would be this November 1, which is 9-10 days from now. Or maybe this upcoming January. If you're looking at 2026, Obviously, these would be not this upcoming November 1, but next November 1. So you are applying a little bit earlier to U.S. institutions, and you are going to apply to a lot of international schools. There's also a tricky thing where different institutions have different deadlines and different programs. So for example, Miami and WashU both have something that's called early decision. This is something where that if you are essentially applying to these schools, and if you apply to them, you're essentially signing a contract that says, if you accept me, I am going to go to your institution. And that's one like philosophy of of basically how this works. It's a great way for you to indicate that you're very interested in these institutions, you really want to go, and that can maybe help you in the process. There's also something called regular decision. Regular decision is essentially you're applying to any school, you're not signing a contract. All of us have a regular decision deadline. And that's essentially just you're applying to that school, and then if you get accepted, you'll still have time to make sure that you're selecting the school that's best for you. Some schools will also have what's called rolling admissions. I think I had a question in the chat about Minnesota State Mankato earlier, and so I think that's a school that I believe probably does rolling admissions, where essentially you apply to them, and then a few days later they get back to you. There's not like one deadline or program that you're a part of. And then, just to make things more confusing, Notre Dame has a program called Restrictive Early Action. This restrictive early action is not binding, not like early decision, where if you're going to apply and they accept you, you're going to go to that school. But we are essentially saying that if you're going to apply early decision 1 or early decision to Miami or WashU, that you actually wait and apply regular decision to Notre Dame. This is the most confusing thing about applying to the US process. Test optional is probably number 2 right now in terms of most confusing, but dates and deadlines is probably the most confusing thing. So if you are sitting there behind your screen thinking, I don't understand any of this, it's okay. Most people don't. This is where reaching out to us, again, we are happy to take this question. We get it all the time, but we also know it is the most confusing thing. And so we want to make sure that we're giving you this information about thinking about when do I want to apply to schools, right? If my application is not ready for November 1 and it's not going to be as strong as maybe a January deadline, well, you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, right? You want to make sure that you're submitting your best application to these schools. And so maybe November 1 would not be a good idea for you, particularly if you're kind of still in that process right now and November 1 is 10 days away, right? You want to make sure that you're submitting your best application. And if you really want to go to Miami or WashU and you're ready to apply November 1, maybe you want to consider something like an early decision program. As someone who does not have early decision, Victor or Emily, do you have any advice that you would love to share with students regarding early decision?
Yeah, Zach, thanks for giving us this opportunity. I think it is really important to know that schools don't usually have different ways that they review applications in an early decision round. We are using the exact same process, the exact same rubrics, the exact same kind of philosophy, but it's a smaller pool. And sometimes in a competitive process, it's easier to stand out in a smaller pool. And that's typically what confers a statistical difference and frankly, an advantage, an increased admission rate in the early decision rounds, at least for WashU. It looks like Emily's nodding as well. So.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think if your admission decision is really contingent upon the financial aid package that you'll receive or the merit scholarships that you're expected to get, that a non-binding plan is a really great option because it allows you to compare those different offers. So an early action, a restrictive early action, or a regular decision would be examples of non-binding plans where you can compare the different aid offers that you might receive.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, thank you for providing that additional context. Just didn't want to speak for institutions that I don't participate in the same process with. Wanted to make sure I gave them a platform. But this is our contact information. If you take a picture of this screen and you want to learn more about our institutions or about a process applying to the United States, take a photo. Write those emails down. We will get to them, right? We want to make sure that we are helping students in this process. So please feel free, take a quick photo. We'll leave it up for a couple minutes just in case you're writing anything down. We don't want to rush anyone. We also do want to, we've got some great questions in the Q&A feature. And if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to keep going through those. I know there's a good number in there, so I'm going to apologize in advance if we don't get to your question before we need to kind of wrap things up. But there was first question here actually from Kai. Is an American and Spanish student educated in Spain considered an international or domestic applicant? Emily, I think you had clicked that you wanted to answer this, so I'll let you.
Yeah, sure. So I would say there's not much of a difference in terms of international versus domestic applicants when it comes to the actual application. Everyone is generally going to be applying on the same platform, which is the Common App. The real only difference is for financial aid, right? So if you are not a US citizen or permanent resident, you would be completing the CSS profile, maybe a financial certification form or its equivalent at your institution of choice. But the actual application is the same. And the only other difference is who is reading your application, right? So Zach, Victor, and I, we all read for international applicants because we understand the different education systems that exist around the world. But really kind of the only difference is if you're applying for financial aid, what applications that you need to complete to be considered for aid. I see this next question here, and there were a few questions on scholarships. So maybe we can all just kind of quickly discuss our policy about kind of scholarships. I'll start with Miami, and it actually might be helpful to go back to the previous slide for this one, Victor, if you wouldn't mind. So for Miami, we offer merit scholarships for all admission plans. We'll automatically consider you for merit scholarships when you apply, so there's no additional application component. But for those who do apply by our November 1st deadline, so either for early decision 1 or early action, we will automatically consider you for premier scholarships. Those range from the full cost of tuition all the way up to the full cost of attendance. So we do give out full ride scholarships, and you are automatically considered if you apply early. We will consider you for other merit scholarships for our January 6th deadline that go up to about $30,000 of merit aid. But then outside of that, we do meet 100% of demonstrated need, regardless of which admission plan you choose. So that could be through a combination of both merit-based aid and need-based aid. Victor, do you want to chat really quickly about WashU and scholarships?
Sure. Yeah. At WashU, the vast majority of our financial aid is need-based, so it's based on your family's financial circumstances. It's not a merit scholarship. We do have some merit scholarships, and you are equally considered for them regardless of which decision plan you apply through. Some you're automatically considered for, others require a very short additional supplement. But again, over 90% of our financial aid is need-based, and you will get the same exact package, including as an international student, across all 3 decision plans. Zach?
Yeah, we offer, similar to WashU, a limited number of merit scholarships, but 97% of our financial aid is need-based. And so essentially what that means is in the US, there's kind of 2 main ways of doing financial aid. The first one is merit scholarships as a form of like, that's how most of the financial aid comes out. Maybe it's like based on your test score or based on your high school GPA or something like that, exam results, etc. And that can work for a lot of schools. Most schools across the United States do this kind of merit scholarship model. About 60 to 100 schools around the country do what's called the need blind admissions or meet 100% of demonstrated need. Sometimes you have to be need aware, but sometimes we meet 100% of demonstrated need, which simply means that, if you are admitted, your family will fill out a form and it basically says, this is how much your family can afford to contribute. If we want to admit you to our schools, we're going to meet the rest of that through need-based financial aid. So if a family can only afford to contribute $10,000 to their child's education every year, that means our schools are going to provide the rest of that financial funding through need-based scholarships. And so it's a little bit different, again, a little bit confusing. So please reach out to us if you have other questions. We all have great resources on our websites that we can kind of share what this actually looks like. But that's something that can maybe help you in this process. But it's something that we're also very fortunate, very blessed to have really generous financial aid opportunities through the need-based process of we just want to bring the best students to our campus, regardless of their family's financial situation. And while we can provide merit scholarships, a lot of us are going to be on that need-based model. Yeah, I think there was another question that in that about guaranteed scholarships. That's kind of the need-based scholarship is we are 100% of demonstrated need. And so if you are applying to a school like Notre Dame or WashU or Miami, and there's the gap between what your family can afford and what the total cost of our attendance is, we're going to try and fill that. And so that's the like guaranteed part of our need-based process. So.
Zach, there are two questions here that I think can close us out well. One, Emily flagged about recommended extracurriculars, and then another one about kind of the schools that do not have AP exams. So I'm happy to answer that one first. We know that every school is different, right? So as Emily was saying, when we review your transcripts, we are looking at them within the context of your school. And we see if your school offers AP exams or not, has particular types of opportunities extracurricularly or not, and we are factoring that into our decision making. So you are not at a disadvantage if you attend a school that does not have AP exams, because we know that in the review process.
I would even say most of the students we work with from Spain probably aren't taking AP. Most of them are probably doing bachillerato. Yeah, so most students are doing that pathway that we're looking at and admitting to our institutions from Spain. Certainly that can vary around the world, as we have a very international audience today. But I would say most students we're looking at are not doing that curriculum, and we know how to read those.
Yeah, I can just close it out with these last two questions. So there was one about recommended extracurriculars. So really, again, we're considering whatever your school offers. We know that extracurriculars can really range depending on where you are in the world. And so if your school doesn't have, sports teams or typical clubs that would be here in the US, we won't hold that against you, right? We just want to see that you're doing something productive with your time outside the classroom, because that's going to indicate to us that you'll come to our schools and really engage in the student life component. And then the last question that we got was in regards to athletic scholarships. So this would be more of a question for Zach and myself, since we both have Division I athletics. Really for that, any athletic scholarships are running through athletics directly. So that process typically starts kind of early on in the admission process. So, we kind of talked a little bit about timelines earlier for when you want to start engaging in the admission process. If you're interested in playing a sport for a school that has Division I athletics, that process usually happens early on. So it's a good idea to kind of start getting in touch with coaches in your US equivalent to 10th grade, maybe 11th grade. That's kind of when coaches are scouting athletes. So Division I sports would have athletic scholarships.